In the novel Nicomachean Ethics, Aristotle aims to establish how an individual can be virtuous and thus live a meaningful life. His theories on essentialism have been regarded as one of the most profound discoveries in the field of philosophy. Due to his relevance in today's society, his theory has been expanded upon by numerous individuals. A final cause is a goal or telos of something for Aristotle. Without a final cause, a thing is purposeless, having no aim or prioritized outcome. If humans are rational animals, then our reason, or ability to enact rational action, is what separates us from other animals. Therefore, if rational action had no purpose, the distinguishing feature of humanity would have no purpose. The final cause of a rational action is the final development of a form of an object. It is what is necessary for an object to reach its peak potentiality, such as for an acorn, the final cause of it is an oak tree, its perfect and final form. Eudaimonia essentially means flourishing, living, and doing well. Eudaimonia is the good for a human life. It is usually translated as happiness, but Aristotle says it is living well and faring well. We have some idea of what it is when an animal or plant is living and faring well. We talk of them flourishing. A plant or animal flourishes when its needs are met in abundance and it is a good specimen of its species. Gardeners try to enable their plants to flourish, zookeepers try to enable the zoo animals to flourish. So, eudaimonia is the good, or the good life, for human beings as the particular sort of being we are. Eudaimonia does not necessarily mean purely happiness, because happiness is usually associated with a particular emotion or sense of euphoria, and expressing or feeling this emotion does not mean that one is fulfilled or reached its purpose. An example of this is a drug addict using heroin to experience euphoria. This shows how a person can experience happiness in a short period of times without being fulfilled, or actually living a life that is faulty or unfulfilled. Eudaimonia is not something subjective, but objective. To say someone is or was eudaimonia is to make an objective judgment about their life as a good human. It is not saying anything directly about their state of mind, nor is it in judgment or subject to themselves, or has any special authority over. By contrast, if someone says they are happy or unhappy, it is difficult to correct them or know better. The nature of the souls of a human being have two different sides, one animal and one rational. The rational side of the soul deals with making appropriate judgments and responses that is in accordance with, or is just to whatever stimulus or whatever environment the person is in. A person must also live and complete a full life, one filled with pleasure, honor, and study, to benefit the soul. It is the careful balance of experience and emotions and responding to your environment throughout your life in a healthy manner that does this. For other creatures, it would be appropriate to just function in their ecosystem, such as reproducing and surviving, or hunting and protecting one's young while avoiding disease or ills such as famine. This is due to a lack of the rational side of the soul that exists within human beings. A flock of geese works to produce seasonally, flies south to avoid harsher cold climates during the winter, and attempts to find a food source, such as a lake with fish. And finally, it needs to find a place that is protected from predators to sleep.
So moving on to essentialism and its definition, what essentialism is it's the school of thought that believes that essence precedes existence. So everything that can be perceived has an essence or set of characteristics that exclusively make that thing what it is. For Aristotle, a goal of the sciences and philosophical thought in general is to discover the essences of things and define them, particularly the essence of humans. Some essences are easier to characterize than others. Aristotle gives the example, a fairly simple one, of a table. A table's essence would be something that is built to fulfill the predetermined task of holding objects at a certain level. That would be the essence of a table. But in fact, everything has an essence that governs its behavior and place in the material world. The essence is not necessarily a purely physical description. In fact, it more often describes multiple types of features and tendencies of behavior. For instance, just because we may lose limbs or be maimed in some way does not mean that we lose that initial nature that defines us and our capabilities as humans. While dramatic injuries may stop one from reaching eudaimonia, it does not change the fact that they once had the capability to reach it, thus making them human. So knowing the essence of a human is important because it serves as a guideline to reach the pinnacle of human existence. If you understand how to keep your mind and body active and healthy, you'll have far more opportunities to live a life where you're comfortable to make decisions that benefit yourself. Likewise, if you can understand what benefits a human being, you'll realize when you're making a decision for the right reasons or for the wrong reasons. For example, if you desire to reach eudaimonia, a short-term solution may be faultily came about by coming to the decision to do unhealthy recreational drugs that will create short-term euphoria. But a consequence of that would be that it will eventually have an extremely debilitating effect on your health. This principle can be applied to any decision you make. If you understand the final goal of being a human, if you understand the final goal of what you want in life, which is easier to do by understanding the essence of a human, then you can more easily make decisions to reach that goal.
Amartya Sen and Martha Nussbaum developed an approach to compare the national differences in ways of life. They believed in essentialism and the idea that certain requirements need to be met in order for an individual to flourish. Instead of solely looking at raw economic measurements to judge whether or not citizens within a particular society are thriving, there needed to be a more fundamental approach to infer the overall happiness and capacity for individuals to succeed. Therefore, they created a list to judge whether or not individuals be able to thrive in a given environment. This list is comprised of 10 capabilities, which include life, bodily health, bodily integrity, senses, imagination, thought, emotions, practical reason, affiliation, other species, play, and finally control. The capability of life is the ability to consciously exist. Without life, we would have no thought and we would lack formal consciousness. Bodily health is possessing a fully functioning body. Being relegated to a wheelchair, for example, limits the flourishing of an individual due to the fact that it is in our nature and a key function of being human to have the ability to move around. Bodily integrity is having the capability of performing tasks that require a certain amount of fitness. For example, someone who is obese will not have the ability to run marathons or climb mountains, which might hinder their overall flourishing and happiness. Emotions is the virtue describing an individual's capability of relating to other people. One who suffers from emotional attachment disorder will have trouble communicating and establishing relationships with other people, which is necessary to live a meaningful life. Practical reason is the ability to understand a situation and thoughtfully consider what is going on around you. If one is lacking reason, then he or she will not understand why people make decisions, which can lead them to be in a constant disagreement with other people. Affiliation is the ability for an individual to build an adequate amount of healthy relationships with other humans. Humans are social animals, and as such, a person without a positive friend group or a familiar circle will not flourish. Other species understanding the essential features to being a human. An individual needs to drink water and eat to function and survive. If someone believes they are a plant who survives on photosynthesis, then he or she will not survive. Play is the ability to enjoy life and experience the fruits of one's own labor. A workaholic, for example, lacks the capability of finding meaning in the parts of life that are separate from work. Control is the ability to discipline one's thoughts and actions. If you lack control, you may constantly get into fights with others, fracturing relationships, or it may prevent yourself from being in a social situation if you cannot respect others' wishes and boundaries. Lastly, senses is the virtue describing the fully functioning and regular use of the 5 senses. A person who is blind, deaf, or otherwise disabled cannot enjoy life in a fully human way.
So moving on to the question, what makes these characteristics, these capabilities, essentialist and Aristotelian? Nussbaum says that these capabilities are necessary to live a life, quote, not so impoverished that it is not worthy of the dignity of a human being, end quote. The 10 capabilities then represent a more specific summary of what Aristotle simply called eudaimonia. These capabilities are the distinguishing features of a eudaimon life, making this theory both essentialist, as these capabilities are the essence of a dignified human life, and Aristotelian, which means that these concepts offer guidance on how to achieve eudaimonia, which is an Aristotelian concept. With an understanding of these factors, you can help make choices to guide your life to a more dignified existence. As for context, history, and culture, the reason they matter is also the reason why this list of capabilities is given in such broad and nebulous terms. Play is a relative term, and while it evokes a similar thought in most people's minds, it may mean different things in different societies and times. If the capability of playing were enacted in the exact same way by every individual, then problems would arise. For instance, a child should probably prioritize playing over the capability of practical reason, whereas a parent raising a child should in many cases prioritize affiliation and control over playing. And these terms can differ within different societies and periods of time. For instance, in the Dark Ages, play is different than it would be today. A more specific example, the Latin word otium, meaning leisure, was a concept in ancient Rome used to describe a citizen's time away from societal obligations. However, this leisure time was usually, in fact, used by Roman citizens to do things considered artistically valuable or enlightening. The Roman concept of leisure, or play, differs from our more contemporary notion in that it was limited to a certain type of activity, albeit one that was also eudaimonic. GDP is a raw measure of the value of goods and services produced by an economy. This is a poor measure of whether people are flourishing because, in many cases, economic growth can occur without a corresponding rise in flourishing. For example, a company that forces its workers to work overtime will probably increase their productivity and cause a corresponding rise in nationwide GDP. However, that same company will decrease the flourishing of its workers because they will have less time to spend with their families and will therefore be less happy. Flourishing is also not just dependent on monetary goods. There are several things that can affect happiness. Some examples of this is how long a person is living, the level and length of education a person receives, and the relationships developed and opportunities present for individuals in their social and professional life.